Greetings and salutations, Scribblers. Welcome back to my humble YouTube channel where we talk books and writing. So today we're going to be talking about the mythical revise and resubmit that writers sometimes get from agents or publishers. We're going to talk about how common they are, what they actually look like, and some steps that you can take should you be the lucky recipient of an R&R. I also want to dig into some of the less talked about, grungier, more personal side of things as well, with my own personal experiences with the revise and resubmit. So let's start with how often authors are being asked to revise and resubmit their manuscripts. When I first started querying, I had this idea that the revise and resubmit was like a mythical unicorn that you'd only see if you are lucky and pure of heart. I had read occasional blog posts about them and there were some Twitter threads, but there really wasn't a whole lot out there. But as I started to get into my own writing group, a lot of the people in that group had had some form of a revise and resubmit. So that was about 10-ish people in my main writing circle. Um, and they had had them at different phases from an agent, from an editor, things like that. Um, so I really started to think maybe these aren't as uncommon as I thought. So I think that that's part of it, is that this is something that's not really discussed a whole lot. And because there's not a lot of information out there, people don't usually talk about the revise and resubmissions. We don't know that they're actually a little bit more common than originally we thought of, right? So I myself have had 1.5 revise and resubmit requests. I give the zero point 0.5 because on my second manuscript, the agent passed and gave me some feedback, but did not ask me to actually resubmit until about 5 months later during a pitch contest when they liked my pitch and left a comment asking me to resubmit if I had taken into consideration the feedback that they had given to me. My second R&R was 100% a please send this again if you do make revisions. So this was complicated, right? First off, I was really excited, but also I was completely gutted, right? And I think it's really important to kind of acknowledge that truth of how I was feeling. I had been super hopeful that this fool and this agent, it was going to work out. Like I just had a really good feeling about it. And so when I got that pass, even with the request for revise and resubmit, it was not pretty. Like I just kind of went down a dark road with my writing and should I bother, things like that. So even with that ember of revision hope kind of sparking between the lines of that pass, I had to process my devastation. So I went through the whole like, why bother writing? Because no one's going to want it, or what's the point in doing revisions? If they had liked it enough, they would have offered representation. Because doesn't everybody know that once you get an agent, you usually do a revision on your manuscript anyways, before it goes out on sub. So I was like, why am I not doing these things? Why am I being left to do this on my own? And I have known actual people who have been picked up by an agent, and then they did a huge revision that completely restructured their manuscript. So it hurt. It hurt to like not be one of those people. And in hindsight, like I can understand the practicality of what this agent was doing um, and why it wasn't ready. But in the moment, it really hurt, right? So this also does depend on the agent. I think that's important to note. So some agents are very editorial in nature. Some have the time and the energy to take on a manuscript that needs a lot of TLC. And sometimes they want something that is just polished enough to go right out on submission to editors. And I kind of suspect that this was more of the case with my almost agent. They are editorial, but they were also managing other clients and didn't maybe want to take on a new client unless they felt 100% confident in my writing abilities. So like I said, in hindsight, I understand this better, but I was still angry and frustrated, and I really had to process that. So my advice to you is if you get a revise and resubmit, don't skip that part. I think it's really important to acknowledge all the feelings that you have about writing. Don't linger there. Don't recommend that, but definitely take a minute, wallow, and then move on. So once I'd done that and I started digging into the specifics of the R&R, I started to argue with them. I'm arguing between a couple of sentences on a page and some feedback, right? Because I clearly had already done all the things that the agent wanted me to do. The groundwork was there, and it just wasn't my fault that they didn't read carefully enough to see all the work I'd done. And again, this is one of those weird things that we do as humans, right? It's not pretty, but it's a very honest way that we process feedback. especially feedback attached to a no. So we immediately want to argue with it, right? It's a very human thing to argue with somebody when they're saying, here's what you're doing wrong, or here's what could be better. Even when we're asking for that feedback, we're like, well, they just didn't get it. They didn't understand it. And that's sometimes true, but also it needs to be something that we can silence those inner voices in our head and just listen, right? Um, Another part of this was just me being so emotionally tied to the project because it was still fresh. Now, several years later, I am not as emotionally tied to it. And so I'm like, if it gets an agent, cool. And if it doesn't, no big, whatever. Um, so it's hard to kind of get rid of that instinctive need to be defensive when we're told something we did wasn't good enough, but we have to try. That's really important. So the truth was that the feedback wasn't bad. It's what I needed, not what I wanted to hear, but it's what I needed. And they were all actionable things. Once I recovered from my little pity party, like I said, I kind of buckled down and I was making charts and tables and bullet lists of all the ways that I wanted to fix this. And I wanted to do my revisions because I wanted to just like throw all of my ideas out there and do a lot of brainstorming because my goal was to win this agent over and get that offer of rep. So I shared my feedback with my critique partners. And they also kept pointing out all the good things and the compliments in the past, which was something that definitely helped me to refocus. I can't stress enough how important it is to build your writing community and to support each other. Because when things like this happen, you need friends willing to listen and support you. So once I made my plan, I put the project aside to just let it breathe and have some space. And this killed me. I am not a give something space kind of a person with a project. I just want to go, go, go until it's finished and it's perfect. But it was the best choice I could have made. I had a plan, but I needed more time to just let it really marinate and fully come together. So while I waited, I did a read through and a minor revision of a previous project. I spent time working on a new project. And then a month later, feeling pretty good about my revise and resubmit and how I was going to work through all those requested changes. But I still didn't start my revisions. I made myself wait another week. So during that week, I did a read through of my manuscript as it existed, and just hand wrote notes into the margins to indicate like what I wanted to adjust and where and things like that. Throughout the entire process, I also read. So there was a specific element in the revision that this agent was looking for, and it was one that I struggled with the most because I didn't entirely see it. And of all the feedback, I did feel this was also the most opinion based. It had to do with mood and tone. So I could see the value in tweaking this component. Um, I started analyzing books. I was reading for this element. I did a reread of a book that definitely managed to do it. I highlighted, took notes, and I studied craft. So I think that that's a really important element when you get a revise and resubmit is to keep reading. Reading is always a great way to learn your craft. So when you look through that list and say, the agent wants some specific things, find examples that do that and then analyze how that happened so that you can apply it to your own writing in some way, right? Um, in the end, though, the biggest changes for me were at the front of the novel. I added in several scenes, one entirely new chapter. Then two more scenes that came later in the book were also completely brand new. But the rest was mostly small stuff. It was word choice, adding a line of emotions or internalization, shifting the focus minutely to highlight one thing or another. And then I took that and I sent my revised manuscript out to new betas about mid August. So I had three betas for this, one who had read it before and two who were brand new to the story and didn't have any prior knowledge to kind of like sully them or confuse them. Because we all know that if you ever read something more than once, you start noticing more things, right? It's the same way when you watch a movie, you start to notice little details and like, oh, that all connects and I can see it now. And that's awesome and that's great. It's one of my favorite things to do. But you also need those first time readers to make sure that you're hitting it enough that first time that all the big picture things come in and come together. Okay. So I was really focused on the feedback of my two new betas. And it went really well. So I got that beta feeder, those beta readers' feedback, and I did another minor revision. None of them had anything major to suggest. It was all just minor things, maybe like a word choice here, or maybe you could like enhance this emotion on this page or that kind of a thing. So all really small. Um, And I was excited. I love this. Okay. I was like, okay, I've done it. Like I have these beta readers and they think they did a good job. So I requeried the agent with my new shiny manuscript. In the end, I had a stronger manuscript. This was not an exclusive R&R, so an exclusive revise and resubmit means that if you choose to requery, you're expected to only send that new version to the agent who requested it. Mine was non-exclusive, so I could query it as widely as I wanted. And I really appreciated this because to me, it speaks to the agent's methods. They wanted what was best for me and my manuscript, even if it means that they aren't the one representing me. Um, so, if you have stuck with me through this long story, you do deserve to know the end. And the agent passed again. Their reason was valid, and I absolutely don't begrudge them for it. I mean, definitely hurt, absolutely. It had to do with changes in the market and not being confident they could sell it. So, most of Revise and Resubmits do end with happy stories of the agent or the editor saying yes, but sometimes they also end with a no, and that's okay, right? Um, I think that it's really important to discuss those stories as well. And I mean, one day I'm going to get the yes, but it was not that day. And it is, as of today, not today. Um, and I will get there. So we always talk about that like long road. But I think seeing stories of it not working kind of in real time are also important. And this is not necessarily real time because I got that pass back in 2022 and it is now 2025. Um, but in the meantime, between that pass and now, I did another huge revision of this manuscript based on some really excellent feedback from a beta reader. Then that fool is now currently in the hands of a different agent. So I just kind of like keep track of like when new agents or new places open up. And if I feel like they'd be a good fit, I'm like, oh, I have this and just sitting here. I can send it out and I have something out there. So fingers crossed for me, right? So, what are my big takeaways from this entire experience? One, revise and resubmits are not as rare as you would think, but they still aren't common. It's a mini investment in you as a writer and a fostering of potential. So, if an agent or an editor reaches out to you and wants a revise and resubmit, like you're doing something right. It's something. It means you're hitting the mark in several different ways, and they see the potential there. They just need a little bit more to really like seal the deal, right? So that's always good, and they happen. So hopefully you get one. Hopefully you just get an offer of rep, but if not, hopefully you get an R&R. You're allowed to be devastated. You're allowed to be frustrated. You're allowed to be angry. You can process all of those things. Take that time, whatever that looks like for you. Take that time and do that. Once you've done that and you've had your wallow, then you need to make a plan. So make a plan, bullet lists, write it out in a journal. However it is that you process and brainstorm, do it. Then walk away. Seriously, please give it a month or two, whatever you need. Let it sit and just let everything kind of like unlock in the back of your mind. Because if you keep like approaching it head on, head on, head on, sometimes it blocks us from seeing those answers. So if you just let it kind of work in the background, um, it'll make it so much easier to reassess and do your revisions when you come back to it. Make sure you test those revisions out on new people who have not read your book before. And then requery that agent, knowing that you have a stronger manuscript. Take all the time you need with this. I think I spent about 5.5, 6 months on my revise and resubmit. Um, you don't want to just turn it around in a week and send it back because that's sending kind of like a message to the agent that you didn't maybe take it seriously enough and you weren't putting the effort in. That's not to say that there isn't somebody out there who could totally rock an amazing revision in a week. But you really do need all that time for all of that processing and thinking and putting things together. So if it takes a year, it takes a year. That's okay. You can take the time that you need. Don't rush things. And then finally, you need to do your self care. So whatever that looks like. For me, that could be eating a piece of cheesecake every day. It could be going for walks with your dog. It could be sitting in the sunshine. Whatever it is that you need, just make sure you're doing that, right? Because if you can't take care of yourself, you're not going to be artistically capable of producing some of your greatest things, right? So really make sure that you're always looking out for yourself. So if you do get a revise and resubmit, congratulations. Welcome to the club. Take your time and really dig into that feedback. The Scribblers Den offers a great asynchronous course on revising your manuscript. You work at your own pace. It tackles all of the steps from refining your theme and purpose for writing to the nitty-gritty details like pacing, character voice, world building, etc. It really breaks down each element of the revision process into little bite-sized manageable chunks. So be sure to check out the link in the description down below. In the end, I learned a lot about writing and myself from this manuscript. And like I said, if this agent doesn't work out, I'm actually very strongly considering starting down the self publication path. But that is another story for another video. Right now, I am busy getting my latest manuscript ready to go out into the query trenches this summer. I'm doing a pretty intense, really fun revision on it. I'm really excited about it. So that's what's happening with me and my writing. If you have had a revise and resubmit experience, please let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments. That's it for me. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Happy writing, Scribblers.